Well, hi, everyone. Welcome to the device segment. I'm super excited to be chatting with Hugh. He's the CEO of Oxehealth. Hugh, thanks so much for taking the time. I really appreciate it.
It's a great pleasure. Thanks for the introduction, Kyle.
Absolutely. To give the audience a little bit more context of why we're having this discussion, we've spent a lot of time looking at the device category. There's well over 500 companies globally within this space in a lot of different segments. But one of the companies that really stood out to us was Oxehealth. Oxehealth is not, it's an understatement just to call it a device company. They're going beyond just building a unique device that goes into a unique workflow that both benefits providers and patients. And we're going to get into that with some deep questions today about that. So before we even get into those questions, Hugh, I think you've got some great visuals for us to set the tone, the context, so the audience has a great baseline of what is Oxehealth.
For sure. Let me give you just a little introduction to the market need and what we do for our partners and customers. So I'm just sharing a screen there. Hopefully you can see the cover slide there. Great. Thanks, Carl. So yes, thank you very much. I'm Hugh. I have the privilege to be the Chief Executive of Oxehealth. We're all looking at healthcare, and we all know we face a demand tsunami. In fact, in the Americas, we often call it the silver tsunami. And the aging population is part of that, the 66 million more elderly in the OECD by 2030. But we've also, of course, got a mental health epidemic. That tragedy is coming into more focus through the current coronavirus challenges, which is very helpful to help people understand that agenda. Clearly, we have coronavirus, and in fact, it'll be coronaviruses. What we don't focus on enough, I think, is the nurse shortage. You know, the World Health Organization estimate by 2030 will be 1 to 3 million nurses short in the OECD. We're running in the UK alone 10 to 25% vacancy rates, and it's similar for the care professions outside of the registered nurse. And actually, if you look at it, you're running about 40% of nurses who took at least one day for work-related stress in the NHS, the UK healthcare provider, last year. So it's a chronic shortage because our current way of staffing inpatient and residential care cannot cope. We need to re-look at how we engineer the care in inpatient and residential care. So in a sense, this is both a hard problem and a very straightforward one. Staff complain to us that it's really a reactive care system that we clinicians operate. You find a patient injured and you're often repairing rather than caring. That's a human tragedy, that's human suffering. But it's also excess visits to A&E, excess deaths, and of course an unsustainable cost for both the payers and the providers. So consequently, we know from our research, and we've been doing about a decade's worth of research in this field, you need proactive care. You need to prevent incidents. That means you actually are giving staff more time to care because they're not repairing, they're on the front foot, they're therefore more productive. The human suffering, the injuries, the hospitalizations, the deaths is reduced, and the payer's cost becomes affordable. So you've tackled the tsunami. That's where we work. We know from our research that clinical foresight saves lives. We exist to give clinical teams the clinical insights they require to plan patient care and to intervene proactively so that they deliver safer, higher quality and more efficient care across both inpatient and residential care settings. In doing that, we're fundamentally helping to set a new standard of care globally, and we do three things. The heart of what we do is what I'll show you in a minute, our Oxevision platform. That's a contact-free technology delivered as software as a service. But that's wrapped within the Oxehealth service, where we help the provider organization understand their business case. We help with training and support, a huge customer success support package, and we actually also help with ROI assessment, so that provider can not only check they've had the benefit they've paid for and pay us for every year, but also, of course, upscale their participation in our service. We also then wrap that in the Oxehealth Clinical Research Forum, because we're finding that our clinical evidence base sets us apart alongside our service offering. And this is, of course, where we get new product development, but it places us at the heart of the clinical community. So let me now, internet connection permitting, let me just show you briefly what Oxevision, the platform at the center of what we do, does for our patients and their staff members, their carers. So you're looking there at the optical sensor. The patient is in bed. There's nothing touching the patient. There is no bed mat. What it's looking at is the microblushing in the skin and the movement of the chest and body to give it pulse and breathing rate. This is a class 2A cleared medical device in Europe with FDA clearance pending. That is the only device of its type in the world. We're also looking at movement. So as the patient gets out of bed, we detect that they're at the edge of the bed. In fact, we then detect that they're out of bed, and we can send alerts so you can head off the fall or other risks that they face. In elderly care or dementia, memory care, it's really the full risk. You're providing activity reports to the tablet, and you're providing high risk alerts. So not only the bed related, but for example, bathroom, aggression, wandering off. Those alerts come in real time, audibly and visually. And of course, there are then the vital sign trends. So really what you're looking at from Oxevision is movement alerting, falls, high risks, other activity detection. You're looking at patient reports, sleep opportunity, overnight activity, pulse and breathing rate. And you're able to take not only vital sign trends, but spot checks. And just to emphasize, this is totally contact-free. There's nothing touching the patient. And when I talk about pulse and breathing rate, this is medically accurate. Although it's contact-free, you're getting an accuracy that is as accurate as contact medical devices. The same as a finger pulse oximeter for pulse rate, and in fact more accurate than any competing device for breathing rate. In addition to that, because the fundamental sensor is a very reliable off-the-shelf digital camera, no moving parts, a very little chance of failure, you get video opportunity. It's video on demand. As you saw in the picture, there's no streaming of video. But if you receive an alert, or if you want to replay what's happened in the room to ascertain the recent history, you can briefly see either a blurred or a clear high definition image of the room. And that's hugely important. And we have that feedback all the time, that part of what differentiates us is that ability to provide video context, the opportunity to exercise clinical judgment on the quality of activity or movement, as well as the vital signs, of course, which is unique, and the activity. Of course, what we're purchased for by our customers is proven outcomes and a fast payback. In memory care, it's a great example of our evidence base. We've seen a nearly 50% reduction in falls. We've seen a 71% reduction in enhanced observation. So that is really work that you didn't expect to have to do because of injury or the risk of injury, where you're normally bringing in agency or additional staff at excess cost. We're seeing a nearly 70% reduction in the need for emergency room admission, and we're seeing a 50% or so reduction in ambulance and paramedic attendance. That's just one of several of the use cases we have across our whole market, which is skilled nursing, care homes or assisted living, behavioral health, in fact, prison health, and indeed other custodial health. So it's really all inpatient and residential settings. And there's a range of business cases, of which I've only illustrated one, the memory care one. What you find, of course, is that if you have created, as we have, this workflow solution where you're bringing unique data plus video context plus intuitive modules that fit into that automate or help you enrich specific parts of the clinical workflow, for example, the night shift handover, the safety observation, you become indispensable. So Tracy here in a memory care environment couldn't imagine not having the system now in place. We feel it makes us feel more secure and sets up patient safety for our patients. We get the same from skilled nursing, from step down, we get the same from care home. So we're left with a solution around the Oxevision platform, the service backed up by the Oxehealth Clinical Research Forum, that now is becoming the standard of care in dementia and behavioural health in the UK, and is coming to be seen that way also in Swedish care homes, and will be coming to the US, subject to FDA clearance, we believe, in the final quarter of 2020. So I hope, Kyle, that's given you a bit of an overview of what we do here at Oxehealth, and it's touched on a little bit that uniqueness you mentioned in your opening.
Yeah, no, this is really great visuals, and I think thank you for taking us through both the problem, the actual product itself, the video, and then also the results of it. I think that's super helpful. I wanted to jump now into specifics of the product and the process, etc. The device itself. Can you explain? So at a baseline, it seems as though it's both an optical sensor and an infrared solution. Can you explain what this device is? How does it work? What does it do? Where does it go? How do you implement something like this in a setting or any hospital setting? Do you have to go everywhere? So, lots of questions.
Of course.
But I'll give it to you.
Yeah, absolutely. So the heart of this device, this is software as a medical device. So all the smarts in the software, all the hardware is generic and off the shelf. So what happens is you place an optical sensor, a digital camera, 2 megapixel off the shelf from a major international supplier. It's not that the software is really independent of that, and a completely commodity with infrared so that it can see in the dark. And you place it in a container in just in the corner of the patient bedroom. We have really fundamentally 2 enclosures, one for a secure setting where there's a risk of self-harm, where it's aggression proof, and the other for a more elegant setting. We work in luxury care homes, for example, assisted living facilities, which is perhaps more elegant on the eye. But you place the device in the corner of the room, it's unobtrusive, and you forget it's there. You wire that with power and Cat 5e or Cat 6 Ethernet cable back to a nursing station and a server which is on the provider premises. So all of the data, all the video, for example, it's on the premise. There is then a secure connection up to our cloud so we can supervise it, particularly supervise the medical device. But it all runs independent of us. It's a standalone system that we can supervise and upgrade. And what happens is the light hits the camera sensor. It obviously turned into bits, and we can then analyze that on the local server with the software. And it's really looking for fundamentally the signals. It's a signal processing device. So the software is looking for the sinusoidal waves associated with pulse and breathing rate, and it's also using computer vision to identify the movement in the room. It's then classifying that with our patented technology. We have 24 filed or granted patents, and then it's displaying the alerts and the report to the clinician. Now the smarts, therefore, are in the signal processing and computer vision, but they're also in the fact that this is, I believe, unique in having a non-medical device software package within which is nested this vital signs functionality. Because the activity monitoring is not a medical device. So we have this unique regulatory framework cleared in Europe and going through clearance with the FDA that allows us to innovate very rapidly around activity and movement, but also allows us to host certified medical devices, plus or minus 3 beats a minute for pulse rate, plus or minus 2 breaths a minute for breathing rate. And it's that's a huge competitive advantage in creating this service.
Yeah, I actually wanted to highlight that in my next question. Before I do so, I want to go back to the first question a little bit. On the actual implementation process, are you helping a lot of these providers? Does your team actually put in this device and route it to their server? Do you provide the server yourself, or how does that actual process work in implementation?
So the service fee is a bundle of hardware and software, so that we take away any concern that the local IT team might have around managing a server that they didn't specify themselves, for example. So it's an independent of their own network. It's very straightforward for them. Typically, these facilities, the more commercial sites, will have power and Ethernet to the room anyway. So it's simply pulling that in to our device. Sometimes they'll cable that ready for us. We then directly, or more normally through a trained installer, someone will place the box on the wall and populate it with the equipment, and then we remotely provision it with the software and bring it live through we have a managed process, a certified process to verify performance of the medical device. So it's a very easy for the customer. It's kind of turnkey, and for us, it's very easy to scale because the in-room activity is totally trainable. There's a whole universe of people out there who install generic cameras, security cameras, for example, and this is no different. We processize this. There's no smarts in the install. Gotcha.
And with that being connected directly to the server in the facility, there's never going to be really any issues with the provider being able to manage individuals within their room.
That's correct. Okay. So yeah, so it's a discrete system.
Gotcha. Okay. Well, I wanted to go back on the last thing that you mentioned, which I think is really important to highlight here, which is when you look at this category and generally patient monitoring, it seems as though, some companies generally across the entire device category, some are more general like patient activities, and then others try to focus on patient vitals. And you kind of do a combination of both, which is, I think, a very unique, like you said, competitive advantage, but also really important. But can you help us understand how you're actually able to detect things like pulse and breathing rate, and why are you focusing on these vital signs specifically? I mean, activity we can generally understand, I think, is important, But why are these important specifically? Why? And again, I'm offloading questions on top of you, but for all your measurements, why are they important in the settings that you work in?
Yeah, sure. So yeah, two fundamental questions: how and why. So on how do we detect the pulse and breathing rate? Again, so when your heart beats, your skin flashes red. So you're actually blushing at me. I mean, I don't want to guess how fit you are, but periodically, probably, somewhere around 60 beats a minute, right? So your skin is going red, your ears are flashing red. Any bit of visible skin is getting perfused. This is a very well understood science. It's called photoplethysmography. So if you've seen the finger pulse oximeter, the general physician will use one. What it's doing is it's shining a light and it's looking at the reflection coming back and it's counting the red flashes. What we've done in the labs of Professor Lionel Tarasenko at Oxford University, from which we are, Lionel's actually just stepped down as Dean of Engineering at Oxford. We've taken that away and we've placed it on the wall, and using infrared we can see in the dark. So that's the smarts in the pulse and the breathing rate. Established technology, but done remotely now at a distance. And as I said, that's really looking for a sine wave and just counting the peaks. The breathing's the same. Your chest or your diaphragm, depending how you're breathing, move. They actually engender movement in your whole body. So we've had people in secure psychiatric settings hide under a desk, under a big coverlet, under a big puffy jacket, and just the tiny infinitesimal movement of the hip has given us an accurate breathing rate on that individual. So any visible part of the body, no matter how thick the clothing, will give you the breathing rate. So again, you're looking for the peaks in that broadly sinusoidal wave. Did that make sense on the how?
Yeah. Yep.
Cool. So then the why do we do these three things? Activity or movement, vital signs, and video context. Well, if you think about the patients we're dealing with, the patients or the residents. So contrast the acute hospital. The acute hospital in, say, the intensive care units, you have someone who's bedbound. Yes, they may try to get out of bed, but fundamentally you can intubate them, you can wire them. So your ability has been well established for a long time to have telemetry. So that fundamentally you're working on a physiological set of risks. You're not really worrying about the physical risks because you've confined them. And there's a whole industry trying to keep you confined and look after you. In the community, you're not thinking about the physical risks because, frankly, we can all go base jump if we want, but you are trying to detect atrial fibrillation, blood pressure onset, whatever it might be. And we've got a whole range of very cool things coming out around logging your behaviors, using devices wearables to try and get the kind of healthy or generally able population's physiological risk quantified. We sit in the middle. So your inpatient, your skilled nursing, your step down, your behavioral health, and your residential, your assisted living, or your care home, they present both physical and physiological risk. So the elderly patient is at risk of falling over, at risk of wandering off and disorientation. The behavioral health patient may be at risk of self-harm or aggression. So you have physical risk, but of course these patients are often medicated. So they're carrying quite extreme physiological risk. We're very interested in their pulse and breathing rate, for example. But they also aren't tolerant of a wired device because you're trying to keep them mobile. The elderly patient wants to live free, and the behavioral health patient may well use it to self-harm. So you can't put a wearable on them. You can't put a wire on them. You actually want to mobilize them, but in allowing them to be mobile, they present physical risks alongside the physiological. That's the problem you've got to solve. Now, if you're going to solve that, and what's interesting, devices and services coming in from community and the hospital have failed. Beds mats from the hospital, wearables from the community, they're not working through. And so you have to solve that a different way. And we solve it by giving you these three elements. Vital signs, because the big pumps, pulse and breathing rate, are going to give you the core information about these physiological risks. The activity is there to head off the physical risks. But because there's a fundamental issue, because we've not had telemetry in these settings with these mobile patients, we don't really understand the early warning signs and the risk factors. That's why everyone talks about falls all the time in this category. It's because it's the one thing that we kind of think we understand as a risk factor or an early warning sign. So we spend a lot of time and we've published on other risk factors and early warning signs, and we're publishing a lot more on that. So because you don't really understand all the risks, you must provide the clinician or this care home supervisor with a video feed. so that when your alert goes off, you can look in and decide whether the movement is risky. Am I worried that they're dwelling by the window? We might tell you they're by the window. That might be something you've told us you want to know about. But tonight, do I go in and deal with that? They've gone into the bathroom, they're in there too long. Am I worried about that? So you need the video context, plus you need the activities and vital signs. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it definitely makes sense, because I think this is the one thing that might be overlooked, is the problem that you talked about, how you fit almost perfectly in the middle of those physiological and then physical issues, and it's a hard problem for the points that you mentioned, which is also the reason why we highlighted you in this event. And we wanted to be able to talk more in detail about how this works. And thank you for that clarification.
Pleasure.
What's interesting about your platform, though, is you seem to focus on trying to be less intrusive. Your dashboard to help providers or clinicians be able to understand what's happening with their patients, you start with alerts. It's interesting that you also provide the video as well, to give more context, but it seems as though you really have this focus on trying to be less intrusive. Why do you do this? What's driving this? What are customers being concerned about being watched? Like, what's the rationale for this?
It's from the patient and resident group, because as I've explained, these mobile individuals within these facilities, often these facilities are their home. Assisted living, for example, custodial is the same. So you're looking to try and give people as much privacy and dignity as possible, and you're looking for them to be able to move unencumbered and unintruded upon. And there's a fundamental problem, which is because the staff can't look after these people and keep them safe without our system, that actually it's a very intrusive regime. So typically in a nursed facility, you're going to have someone visit the room and enter the room to check that you're breathing, maybe using a torch or turning the light on, up to every 15 minutes. So sleep disturbance is huge, but it's not huge because of our technology, it's huge before we arrive. So one of the principal goals of our customers is to reduce disturbance at night. And so what we do is we enable you to take a pulse and breathing rate and briefly look in. By the way, we never stream video. It's on demand to someone who has the right to enter the room. It's very tightly controlled, and it's normally limited to 10 seconds. And it can be blurred to preserve privacy, and it's only of the bedroom, never of the bathroom. So you can look in, you can take pulse and breathing rate, you can confirm that the individual's safe, and you don't wake them up. And so it seems perverse, because you're putting a camera into what's seen as a private space, but people report having greater privacy and greater dignity by doing that. So it's just one of those counterintuitive findings that great businesses are built on. The reason we go on about it a lot is therefore that's what the staff need to help their patients. And also it's very important to highlight, we have class leading security. We're audited to ISO 27001, ISO 13485. We have a raft of high security UK government clearances. We're HIPAA compliant, we're business associate agreement ready. All of those things are taken care of. So we like people to know we've covered the bases.
Yeah. I think you do a good mix of both by being able to just at least give a signal to providers whether or not there is an issue or if everything's okay. But I think it's also interesting that you provide that at least if there is an issue, a 10-second video for context. For that exact reason. Is it something super serious, or is it something that requires intervention, or maybe not? I think it's unique, very unique.
There is one other hidden benefit that people don't see, that again we're publishing in the Journal of Clinical Engineering shortly, and our customers recognize, is learning. So again, in all of these settings, the idea of a just-in-learning culture, normally learned from the airline industry, and we are actually starting to work with experts in airline safety to try and bring some of those insights into healthcare in this way. But if you, for example, very specific, if someone has fallen over, then if they've hit their head, they need one-to-one supervision, neurological observation, or they need to go to the emergency room. Well, if you've missed that fall, or you've arrived just not in quite time to help them, you need to know what happened. Did they hit their head on the way down? What you need is a 20-second video clip or a 2-minute video clip to see exactly what precursor it was, to know how you care for them. Equally, if there's a more serious incident, you need to be able to look at the telemetry, the vital signs of the activity, plus the video, so you can learn, if you couldn't save that patient, what about the next patient? And so learning to underpin continuous improvement is not only a benefit of our platform, but it's actually what the clinical profession are looking for. And that's the other reason the video, in a very tightly controlled way, is crucial. It's like a time machine when you put it next to the other data.
Interesting. Now, what does that workflow look like for a provider? Is it in their offices, they receive a dashboard that allows them to see every single room? And, you talked about the videos that they are able to access, but is it something like this is easy to integrate with the existing provider's workflow?
Yeah, it is, and indeed, if you'd like a still shot of that, Ben can get one over to you, Kyle. But fundamentally, what you're presented with is we always we require one wired device, normally in the nursing station, because in case of the failure of Wi-Fi as a fail-safe. But we also provide tablets or in some settings mobile handset devices. And what you see is an at a glance red, amber, green for every room. So you can see at a glance who's got an alert going off, who's got a warning going off, and the status: in bed, in room, in bathroom, activity alert, edge of bed, whatever it might be. So you get a nice at a glance of your ward or your care home. And then you have the ability to click in and take other data. So you can have a look at the patient's activity report, their vital signs, and you can perform certain workflow tasks. So, for example, a one-to-one supervision module, a night shift handover. Here's how the whole ward looks. This is an ability to very quickly go through and brief in on last night. And that's where you see things such as discovering UTIs. My goodness, Mr. X has gone from popping into the bathroom once a night to going in there 4 times. We really must investigate. So it's a general overview and then workflow specific modules.
Gotcha. Okay. And I'm curious, and I'm not. You've kind of already highlighted this a little bit earlier, but are you, and even for your customers, are they ever concerned about the risks of being able to use your platform? What happens if your platform doesn't detect an issue that arises? Is that something that you're concerned of, or confident that that's not going to happen?
So we are a supplement to human managed work processes. So we assist clinical judgment. We're not a diagnostic, and we're not a fail-safe device. That's why we're a class 2A medical device, not a class 3. So it is a requirement of our labeling that you have an individual with a duty of care and a risk assessment process. So ultimately, all of our patients and residents will be risk assessed, and there'll be a deemed minimum human visit rate. But what we're really trying to do is minimize the invasiveness of that regime, maximize the extra information between those checks. And that's really where the value comes, and the business case also comes.
Yeah, so it's really a tool to amplify what a lot of providers are able to do today, but also reduce the workload that they have to deal with, and also the comfort of the patient.
We've got stressed and overloaded healthcare professionals, and they need help to get better data and to be more proactive.
Do you actually, in healthcare, it's a difficult industry, not only the problem itself, but the product that you're building, but it's really tough to work with providers. The sales cycles are much longer. And I'm just curious, how have you managed that issue of working with long sales cycles, or providers that take a really long time to make a decision, or maybe even much limited budgets than what you'd think?
So it's interesting. We got the cleared medical device in Europe in September 18, so we're 2 years in the market. In our first market in the UK, our 2 key markets are Swedish care home and UK behavioural health, which is a form of skilled nursing, includes dementia. We are now, inside of 2 years, we're in 1 in 3 English behavioural health providers. So when I talk about establishing a standard of care, I really think we're on with that journey. So the penetration has been really quite astounding. And what's interesting is we are they're fitting out whole facilities. So if you look at our social media feed, you'll see Broadmoor is a hospital. That's the most sophisticated hospital in its class, and they put us everywhere. So we're seeing large purchases. We're seeing kind of 5-year terms with auto renews, and we're seeing it across the whole industry. And I very much hope when we come to US skilled nursing, we'll see the same thing. Watch this space. But in terms of the sales cycle, we've learned a lot. It's dropping change dramatically. I think it's going to settle at between 6 and 9 months, which actually against a classic enterprise sales business is not, it's not so bad, right? It's highly comparable. And of course, what you've got then is worth noticing that when you've made that sale, you've not only got, your 5-year contract with the possibility to upsell, land and expand, but it is worth noticing they typically will change their ward policies to require the use of our system. So you've become written into the operating system of that ward. In a way, you are the operating system for the ward. So it's an extraordinarily sticky solution.
Interesting. And for you in your specific space, what is that? Do you actually have to implement into existing EHR solutions, or is this what is a standalone solution that providers are just adding on top of what they already use today?
Yeah, again, another great question. So it's a standalone system. We integrate out, so our reports can be inserted into the EHRs. We haven't had any need to suck anything in from the EHRs because of the way in which these patients and residents are handled and their data is handled. And to be honest, I see gentle increase in integration, but it isn't critical. What's critical is we're helping you handle the planning of that patient care, and we're helping you handle the intervening in that patient's care. Sort of some of the other things the EHR does, the medication logging, the wider medical note taking, it's complementary. It's, to be honest, it's not particularly first line for the patients we support on. So I'm sure we'll enter into a deeper collaboration with our EHR colleagues in time, but it's not a priority for our customers. Interesting.
And the actual workflow for a lot of these providers today, is it just pen and paper? Is it just interesting?
Yeah, exactly. These people, you have to imagine a corridor with 10 to 20 people on. They're in bed. Some of them could be putting themselves at risk. You've got no data. You're personally liable, and you've got no system to support you. Then we come along. We're giving a real gift here.
I mean, that's a huge jump from what the workflow that a lot of these providers have today. Oh, well, at this point, it probably already seems obvious, but I just want to reiterate it just so that the audience has an understanding of what really resonates with a lot of your customers. But what are the examples of deliverables that you pitch to these customers, and what really resonates with them and the providers that you work with?
Do you mean in terms of outcome promises, as it were?
Yeah, when you're talking about Oxehealth and the platform and how it may actually benefit providers, what are some of the deliverables that you can promise that really resonate with them?
So, because it's healthcare, it's a mixture of, it's a package of benefit, and so it's around safer, higher quality and efficient care. So it's not appropriate when you're in a caring industry just to focus on the efficiency. And by the way, the efficiency is operational as well as kind of the crude dollars and cents cost improvement. It's all three. And so your customer is the nursing director or the chief medical officer. And so they do start from patient experience, which they regard as not optimized, staff experience where they have turnover issues, vacancy issues, a nasty war for talent. And of course, then how can I make my staffing and operation more efficient? So it's a mixture. For us, we come very much from the point of view of helping the staff help the patient, and that's where they need a planning tool from actual early warning signs and risk factors. So the offer really is to say, look, we've got a platform that for the first time will quantify risk factors and early warning signs based in a very deep evidence base. This will give you foresight. With that foresight, you can do a tremendous number of things. So that's one. Secondly, we help you in a very practical way with the change management, because let's be honest, healthcare IT has done some horrible things in provider organizations. And also you have leaders here who are not used to integrating a workflow tool because they've not had one. So this move to data-enabled care, what we call vision-based patient monitoring and management, needs support. So very sophisticated customer success team. And it's very easy to slot in. And although you will end up changing your protocols, you don't need to change anything and you'll still get benefit. And the third piece is benefits realization, which is really providing them with some assurance that we're not just going to come in with some numbers from somewhere else, claim a benefit and then leave them to it. We'll help them actually assess their business case and their clinical case, write their board paper. Once that board paper's gone in, we will actually provide them advisory. We prefer not to do the whole survey and data crunching, but we'll provide them with formats, templates, tools, and advisory on how they can then check they've got the ROI to justify moving their whole care system across to us. And so I think that support on the platform, at the ward level, and on the business case is really what gives them earns us their trust in order to adopt.
Wow. You make it extremely easy for, I think, a lot of providers.
To transform your care. That's all it takes.
Wow. And to participate in that process of helping them understand in a lot of different ways how it might be beneficial. That's really great.
And to notice you're going to step change, and then every year, because of the learning system, your staff will improve their own way of working, quite apart from what we'll ship you in terms of new product.
Interesting. I only have a couple more questions. One is, the elephant in the room is really, how has the pandemic really affected your business?
Yeah.
And then,
look, we're all suffering. We all know people who've suffered. So the first thing is, it's just a horrendous time, isn't it, Kyle? I mean,
yeah.
Commercially, I think there's two things. There's no doubt look, we've grown ARR, annual recurring revenue, 5x year on year. So the business is very much on the S curve, and I'm grateful for that. We lost a quarter's velocity. I don't think it's going to translate into a loss of a quarter's sales. I think we're going to be there or thereabouts where we wanted to be. We lost the second quarter of the calendar year. Really, the decision-making process in our customers was really kind of just stopped because the boards were all scrambling to reassess their posture. We are kind of making that back up in Q3, Q4. So I think, we may get a little bit of a nip on the growth this year just because of the decision rate, but I think we actually might end up roughly where we wanted to be. In terms of the longer term trend, well, I think without being crudely commercial, the pandemic's focusing us all on the massive pinch point in assisted living, the massive pinch point in step down care, the challenges of the tsunami I talked about in my earlier remarks. It's focusing us on the need to manage infection control. So we have an infection control module. You can mark up an infection risk. You can use, obviously, vital sign trends, particularly around breathing rate, to look into how your respiratory risk is looking. You can start spotting deterioration to try and identify infection risk. So we help with infection control. We help with infection management. So elderly care, mental health, infection control, remote patient monitoring, the need for scalable systems, and the staff shortage. I think, to be honest, they were all there anyway, and it's bringing it into relief. So I think medium term, we're one of those businesses that will be supporting the effort for population health improvement.
Awesome. Well, I think, it's such an interesting environment to be in, especially your position, because the pandemic, it has kind of caused a mix of chaos, but also highlighted a lot of bottlenecks and can be kind of a silver lining for solutions like yourself that probably should be in practice today for all the reasons that we discussed, and improving healthcare overall. So I think, it's an interesting position to be in. Last question that I have for you is, what do you think is the future of patient monitoring going? What do you see that most people don't?
So I think, if we really look at what we're doing, I think we're creating a new category within patient monitoring or devices where you placed us for this very cool event. So we talked about it just now, this need to provide not only data through the platform, a workflow solution, but the customer success, the training and the embedding and the support, and then the protocol evolution as people use it more, how they can shift their protocols to take full advantage, trimming their risk assessment stage or tweaking it, for example. So I think it's that end-to-end of the service is required not only to earn the trust of the customers, but to fully support them and to enable them fully to exploit the data. And what that really ends up in is you need to, I think, within your category, your segment, really truly understand what it takes to create data-enabled care. So I believe, and we're publishing actually an academic piece on vision-based patient monitoring and management, Professor Tarasenko and the team and I, where we have really looked at, well, what is the patient journey, risk factors, early warning sign, intervention, event, post-event, learning opportunity, or indeed a tribunal or coroner's court. That's the patient journey. And there are only 4 activities that the staff do. They risk assess, they observe, they intervene if necessary, and they improve their care. So we have to understand the journey and the staff, and we have to then look very carefully at the telemetry and the workflow tool that's needed to match one to the other. And I think people that have just got a technology and are pushing it can't help. The healthcare is too complicated. You have to understand the destination and what this data-enabled care looks like for your particular customers, and then you have to give this service of data, people training and protocol in order for your customer to exploit you and what you're offering. And I think that's the nub of it. And as I say, we have IP there as well as IP in the technology. And I hope, and I think that's what it's going to take to be part of the standard of care, which is where you really want to be. That's when you know you're really supporting staff as fully as possible for the patient.
Awesome. I mean, it makes sense. Hugh, this is super impressive. I'm super happy that you took the time to do this. With that, before I make any closing remarks, do you have any asks or things you want to highlight to the audience before we close out?
Well, look, I think thanks very much for your time. I've really enjoyed it. I think it is a privilege for us to try and help clinicians save lives and improve healthcare for everyone, which is what our dream is. If you're an investor audience, as you are here, there's probably one thing I'd like to leave you with is where I think Oxehealth ends up, and where I think we are today with 1 in 3 behavioral health groups and heading that way with care homes and step down, is we are clinical experts partnering with the provider C-suite to help them transform the safety, quality, and efficiency of care. We're not pushing technology. And if you're looking at technology push businesses, I'd caution you on that. And certainly we stand apart from that, and that's partly why we win business. The second thing is we're trusted teammates. In fact, one ward leader, she said, look, we regard you as the 6th member of the team on the night shift, the Oxevision platform. That's the difference you make to our patients. So trusted members of teammates to clinical staff, helping them to save lives, to plan care, and to intervene. And the third thing is I think you're looking to invest in what will become, I'm completely confident, effectively the operating system within these wards and these care homes, the operating system, the clinical operating system to these staff members that underpins 21st century inpatient care and residential care. I think we will not only be helping save lives, as we know we have, and helping staff improve healthcare, but I think we'll deliver you an enviable shareholder return. And involved particularly in US growth capital funding, which is where we'll be going next. I'd love to hear from you and have that opportunity to talk to you.
Wow. Well, Hugh, thank you so much for taking the time. I mean, absolutely impressive. Again, for the audience, perspective, we looked at well over 500 plus, companies that are part of the device management category. And one of the things that we're really impressed by was Oxehealth. And you heard it today, why you're an impressive company, not just what you just mentioned. You're not pushing technology, you're end-to-end workflow for a lot of these providers. And it's really impressive, the features that you built, not only specifically with hardware itself, the simplicity by using off-the-market shelf products, but then also being able to integrate with the room, identify all these features about it, both vitals, both activity, and then be able to build a workflow around it for the providers. It makes sense, saves money, saves lives, it's less risky, cost efficient. It's a absolutely no-brainer, which is one of the reasons why we're super happy to have you here. So thank you so much, Hugh, for doing this. Really appreciate it. Everyone, please check out Oxehealth.
Thank you very much, Carl.